So yeah, my name is Bruce, and I'm chairing the session today. I'd like to go ahead and welcome Lindy Elkins Tanton, Carolyn Bickers, and also Turner Bohlen. Hopefully, I didn't slaughter names too well. And they're doing it sounds like a very cool presentation on a Make It Matter, a collaborative student-led engagement and persistence program. And I guess Turner, you're starting, correct?
Yes, I will kick us off. Rachel and Laura, welcome, and thanks for joining us. We'll see if other people join as we go, but we're going to do like a very collaborative session here, demoing how we do this. And I think everyone's going to participate, which is going to be great. So I'll do a quick intro on what this program is, and then I'll hand it off to Lindy and Carolyn, who will actually walk us through a couple of steps of the program so we can sort of experience what it's like to be a student as we go through this. So next slide here. So there you go. Perfect. So first of all, quick intros on us. So I am the CEO at Beagle Learning, which is an education company loosely based out of Boston, although we're all remote now. And Carolyn is the COO, and we've both been working on this for a number of years, working specifically to build teaching methodologies and online learning platforms to help people learn the skills that allow them to thrive in the modern world. And Lindy is vice president at Arizona State University for the Interplanetary Initiative and lead of the NASA Psyche mission, which is a very cool, what is it, $800 million program now to send a robotic orbiter to an asteroid in the asteroid belt.
Yep.
So that's us in very brief. So I want to start with a little bit of what motivated us to think about persistence in education, and specifically this Make It Matter program. So the basic idea is that to persist through both K-12 and higher education, students need a combination of a bunch of different things: academic support, a sense of belonging in the community they're in, and also a real world relevance of their learning, or some understanding of why this learning is of value to them. And these were specifically pulled from a large-scale study that Civitas did in 2019 based on all the data they'd collected across, I don't know how many universities, but tens, if not hundreds of thousands of students. And what we sort of looked at this and started designing a program around what we thought it would take to directly target these three needs of persistence. So the next slide here. And we don't see this just as a persistence problem, right? We see this much more as a global challenge around what we're trying to achieve with education. So looking globally, if you scale this up, that previous study was just the US. For every 100 students of school age, 65 attend high school, and only third attend any amount of tertiary education, let alone graduating. So that's about a 3% attendance rate in college. In the US, I actually don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's our total achievement rate for college, I think, is around 45% right now in the US in terms of total population. Next slide here. So the result of this is that 97% of the people who are coming through our education system are not getting the set of skills around higher order thinking, problem solving, critical thinking that it takes to make big change in the world and to be an active member of sort of a modern society. So we see this not just as a problem for keeping people in school, but also in terms of the skills that they're trying to gain. Next slide off of this. And the final point I want to make here around the issues that we're facing here. So we're missing this key set of skills. A huge number of people aren't even getting to the college level that they need in order to gain these skills. And the final problem to add on top of this is part of the reason for that is engagement. When we look at engagement over time by grade level, it drops really substantially as you go through high school. So self-reported authentic engagement is up near like 67%, 2/3 of people in 6th grade, and by 12th grade, it's down to 1/3. And that does also reflect, what I think many of us have seen in terms of when people start losing interest in what's learning and potentially dropping out of school. So next slide here. So what are we doing about this? So the problems are missing skills, low levels of authentic engagement, and all of that resulting in people not being able to sort of enter the workforce and enter life with what they need. So what we designed around this was a program called Make It Matter. And in it, we built a 5-phase process for running learner-led projects. And the intent here was that by giving students a clear structure for the project they're going to run, but really sort of radically complete ownership over what they're working on, we can train people in the skills that they need to succeed, but also have a very, very authentic engagement with the program because they're choosing an issue that's relevant to them. So in brief, the 5 elements that we walk students through in our programs are first problem selection and ownership. So this is where they're choosing what goal they want to try to accomplish within the program. And we make this always a question. So we've often have ones, for example, around homelessness. How can I best support the homeless people in my community? Something like this. Then we go into a research phase where the goal is to learn what you don't know about the issue. We're all about this idea that we shouldn't go in with assumptions and we should instead try to learn what's really happening in the field. And so we go through an inquiry-based research cycle. Then element 3 is planning. So we help people understand how to plan a project that they would run, think about the operations of it. 4th one is operations, where you actually run the plan. And then the final 5th element is learning and reflection. And there's 2 big goals in learning and reflection here. The first one that I want to highlight is being able to reflect on what you got out of this so that you as a student can then share that with others. But we also collect examples of what people learned and make that available as resources for other students going forward in the future. So those are our 5 elements. That's what we walk students through. Let's jump to the next slide here. So in the context of this program, before we actually dive into having you all participate in the program in this call, which will be really fun, I want to talk a little bit about the culture that we try to get to and how we want people to engage. So here are 4 principles that we really hold up through all of these programs. So the one is that every person in the room speaks and is respected for their opinion. And we build this into the structure. So we remind people of this, and we create structures where every student is required to bring in and contribute an idea at many steps different through the process. And this is a huge issue, obviously, for just equity today. And we want to build that in from the beginning. The second idea is that everything is an experiment, including this process itself. So we were talking actually just among the organizers before the call started about failing in a safe environment. And we don't necessarily talk about it as failing, but we do talk about everything as an experiment so that people are open and willing to see what works and what doesn't and learn from it. And we think that's sort of this first big emotional step people have to take in learning how to learn on their own. Third principle is that the team leads and they choose what matters to them. We let them discover and get around barriers for themselves. So this is where we are trying to scaffold a process, but allow students to go through the process on their own. And when they run into issues, it is them running into the issue. We're not trying to protect them from hitting that issue so that they can then learn from how to solve it. And finally, saying, I don't know. We really want to promote this idea that it's okay not to know, and even the facilitator or the teacher in the room often doesn't, and that's a good thing to acknowledge and support so that students realize that's okay and are willing to go out and do the research to then learn from there. So those are our cultural goals. And finally, I want to share a little bit about the early results. So we've been running pilot programs using this structure at a variety of different locations. You can see the logos on the left. These range from 5th and 6th grade in Mesa Public Schools all the way up to college level students at ASU, Edmonds College, WSU Tech, Illinois State, and CSU Fresno. So a whole variety of tests. One of the ones that's gone the furthest so far is Riverview High School in Mesa. So Riverview High School is an alternative placement school. It's a school where people who had to leave or were kicked out of their traditional high school were then placed to support them to their education. And those kinds of schools often have very high failure rates. So in their ELA classes before Beagle, they were seeing about a 72% failure rate, a 28% pass rate, and just a 5% pass rate in social studies. They then took those 2 curriculums and they were really bold, and we really enjoyed working with them on this, and they turned the entire curriculum into a Make It Matter style inquiry-based project where students chose topics within these fields and then did the research on their own to learn how to create final projects and final synthesis of the information. And so you can see ELA pass rate went up to about 42% and social studies went up to 53%. And for this school and this environment, those are huge, huge changes. So it's an overall 30% reduction in the failures that were happening in that group of students. So super excited about that. Let's jump to the next slide. And at this point, I want to hand it off to Carolyn, I believe, to start going through the actual program and giving you all a sense of how we run this.
All right. Yeah. So we're going to be, for this session today, we just have 60 minutes together, but we're actually going to run you through elements 1 and 2 of this process. We're not going to have time to go through 3, 4, or 5, but I'll explain those to you so you get a kind of sense of that whole program. And then we are going to send these slides to you all at the end. So this is going to be interactive. So if, feel free to if you feel comfortable to put on the video, feel free. But we're actually going to do this whole process together. So the first thing that we're going to do is really choosing that community action question. And when we run these sessions with the students, when our instructors run sessions with the students, they have the students really think about what is my community? What do we in this team have in terms of different communities? And what does that look like? And then also it's really important to realize that, we don't know enough yet about what our community needs. So we want to make sure to pose our question, pose these as questions. And that's going to really help us to then pursue that and explore and dig deeper in the research process so that we can then refine that question and take action on it later. So a couple examples of what those questions might look like are, what could help high school students make it to college? How is our community reacting to anti-Asian violence? Or what barriers exist to better healthy food access and how can we affect them? These are all questions that students have come up with themselves. And we have kind of we're building a bank of questions that students have come up with as well. So happy to share that at the end. So now that you kind of have that prompt, it would be great for everyone to just take about 3 minutes to brainstorm some questions that you all care about around your own communities. And that community could be this environment that we are in together right now, this online community, or it could be your own personal community at home too. That's fine as well. So I'm going to put on a timer and give you 3 minutes to brainstorm. And as you come up with them, please feel free to put them in the chat. And our team is going to go ahead and type them up in the slide for the next step.
And Carolyn, can I briefly add what we're going to go forward with on this over the next 20 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify everyone. So we are going to take this and then we're actually going to go into the research cycle and think about how we would do research on this. So there is actually an opportunity to kind of learn a little bit about one of these questions if you have something you really want to dig into.
All right. So starting the timer now, please feel free to put things in the chat or else you can unmic and we can start dictating in this slide.
Do you want to go to, go to the next slide? I'm going to start us off just by adding one of the questions that our 6th grade class started working on, because I think it's such a great question.
Awesome.
So anybody out there in this session have ideas of what a question of NHG's question? There we go. Oh, that's a great one. Oh my God.
I love it. Yeah, and I know a couple of folks kind of came in late too. So just like what these questions are, or these are questions that students come up with that they can pursue an entire semester and some even an entire year together. And so they're researching them, creating a plan, and then taking action on these questions. So these are very big questions about their communities and how they can make a difference.
You said it's Tucson?
I love that one too. I've just finally had a successful composting experience this year.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's a huge one. Childcare, that comes up so often. Really, really important.
We just have 30 more seconds, so feel free to add in multiple.
And actually, I'll highlight what Bruce just posted too. If you don't have it in the form of a question, often it's able to start with a topic and then you turn it into a question. So feel free to post a topic if you don't have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just rashly made Bruce's into a question while I typed it in. Kinga has got a great one. Hi, Kinga. Thanks so much for coming.
Okay.
Awesome.
That's a pretty good list, actually, unless anyone has another one to add. It's pretty good.
Yeah, this is a great list. We are at our 3-minute mark. So let's everyone just take a chance, take a moment to look at these questions and kind of read them. And then think about if you had, 2 votes, to think about what are your favorite of these. And sorry, a little context before we actually go ahead and vote. So usually as a next step here, the facilitator works with the students to discuss, just to dig into these questions and kind of ask for any clarifications around them that people might have. This is our session today is pretty tight, so we don't necessarily have time to do that, but it's really important that everyone is clear around what everyone meant by their questions here. And then usually we all decide, okay, how many votes should we have? And that's kind of a fun decision to have together. But because I'm leading this session, I'm going to decide that everyone gets 2 votes this time.
You're such a
because
tyrant,
we don't
Karen.
have too much time.
Yeah.
I know, I'm the dictator of our exploration learning experience. But so if everyone can just scan these and then jot down the number of the 2 questions that you like the most. And then when I say go, we're all going to put them in the chat. And so then we'll count up the votes and we'll bold the question that we all decided. So I'm going to give us a minute to do that.
And in the classroom or with our team, the purpose of this would be a longer process that does include voting, but it's a longer process to help the students decide which one they want to pursue for the whole project. So this becomes the topic of all the research and the actions that we end up taking. So we want to go through a bunch of processes to gain consensus, which today we're just doing by voting.
Right.
Yeah, top 2 questions. That's right. Are we all ready?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go. Rachel's ahead of the game, so go for it.
Right. Oh my gosh, everybody loves 3. Look at that. Oh my God.
Awesome. So it looks like we've got 5 votes for 3.
Yeah, 3 is the decided winner here.
That's amazing.
And what was the next runner up? Did anyone count what the second rank was?
Number 4.
Okay, and 4 had how many?
4 votes.
Good
4
ones.
votes. Okay, cool. So this is a great kind of point here where, again, we don't have enough time to dig into the nitty gritty on this, but we'll obviously follow up. But a lot of, we also have a very important discussion around that consensus, like Lindy said, and also thinking about, okay, cool, 3 won the most votes, but would everyone feel good about moving forward with this question for the next 6 months or the next year? Is this, what would, do we need to kind of grapple with that and just talk about that? And so there we have a series of discussions that we'll often have with the students to make sure that folks are really excited and we all want to go and research composting together, and we're excited to do that. So that is an awesome question. Very excited. The last little bit that I'll share is just if we had time to do the full element 1, what else we would be doing. So once we decided and built consensus on that question, then we would do essentially a group norms activity where we would all kind of outline in a bit more detail what are kind of our rules of our cultural and operational rules together. And that could be anything from, hey, if you're not going to be able to show up give 24 hours notice to the whole team, or, you know, every single voice is always heard. We will go long in the meeting to make sure that everyone talks. And so usually the steps in that activity include everyone kind of brainstorming on their own of good teams they've been on and bringing their top, their number 1 or 2 group norms from those previous experiences and bringing them to the new group, which is really helpful to talk about explicitly as a kind of way forward for the rest of that semester. And then we do a progress check-in where we kind of talk about key questions, like do we feel like we're ready to move forward, and we'll get more into that. But it's helpful to have everyone kind of discuss and share where they feel like they are in the process, because it is owned by the students, like Turner said. That's a key component of this. So with that, I think I will hand it over to the next, I think it's Lindy or Turner will be sharing next.
So I want to pause before we get into element 2, because you might have noticed we're using words like meeting and team all the time here, and I wanted to emphasize for everyone why we're doing that, and also the environments that this gets used in. So we are using meeting and team because the goal of this process is to give students in an educational context, as well as teams outside of an educational context, the sense of real work being done, that this is about you achieving a goal that you care about for your community. So we tend to bias toward those sort of more work-related words instead of saying we're a class and a classroom. But I wanted to make sure that didn't disguise the fact that this is absolutely getting used in classrooms for, as I said, 5th through higher ed, but we still try to use that language. So I wanted to make that point. And then the second thing I wanted to mention before we dive into element 2 is we're giving you this fast preview, but I thought I would just take a second here, because I don't think it's in our script, to briefly say what we mean when we say we're running this with a set of students. So when we go out and run this with a community, what we're actually doing is we're providing them with a facilitation guide and a set of professional development activities to train the teachers in that environment how to run it. And then we do also support them with a software system to handle that. So when we say we're going in and doing this, we're really working with the teachers in the environment to do this. So I thought I'd give that context just in case you were sitting there sort of trying to imagine where team and meeting was coming from and how that fits in. All right. I think I'm going to fly through this, and then maybe we can add a time for questions in a bit. So element 2. After we have a group of students select their goal that they want to accomplish, and it could be anything, as we've seen in the previous topic, or it could also be topic specific. If you're in a social studies class, you might specifically choose something in social studies. Then we go into this research phase. So I'm going to walk through the framework that we use for research with our students. And this phase can take anywhere from a week up to potentially even a full semester in some cases. People will spend doing research on different topics. So the purpose of the research section. Let's jump to the next slide here. So there's a couple of really important things we want to accomplish as we're doing research, and this is exactly what we would talk to students about. So the first is that we want to keep our minds open to aspects of this issue that we didn't know about. We phrased the issue as a question specifically to invite us to identify needs that we weren't aware of and that we could help solve. We want to make sure we're learning about stakeholders in the community that are already engaged with this. And we want to make sure that we're maximizing learning by having every team member contribute unique information. So I'm going to pause on this one for a second because it ties to some pedagogical goals that we have. When you think about a discussion in a classroom ordinarily, in most cases, every student is coming to that discussion having consumed the exact same information, whether it's a piece of homework or a book. And what we found is that that tends to drop the engagement a lot because most students don't have a reason they have to listen to the other person there. It's nice, it's fun maybe, but it's not necessarily critical information they could have gotten on their own. In this environment, every student is bringing a unique piece of research that they found on their own. And that means that the discussions get way more lively and way more involved because everyone needs what everyone else has. And it also helps to build that equity goal where you recognize that every single person, no matter their background, is bringing a unique and different perspective that's valuable to the conversation. And then the final thing we do, the final purpose of this is to craft a more effective action or project overall now that we understand the issue. So we'll explain all that to students before we dive in, and we can jump to the next slide. So we do research through an inquiry-based research cycle. We're just gonna flash this on the screen. This is what it looks like. I'll come back to this explanation in a second, but first I wanna talk through the process. So we just set that goal, right? That's gonna be represented on the right side of our screen with this diamond. If you were to think about how you or I outside of the classroom might go about trying to achieve that goal, we're probably gonna find some initial piece of content through something like Google that talks about the goal we're interested in, but it's maybe not going to answer it completely. So I always have this joke, one that I do, of how to brew a great cup of coffee. If I want to discover how to brew a great cup of coffee and I go find an article on it, it might talk about the kind of bean, but it doesn't tell me the temperature I should brew it at. So I have a natural next question there, and that is a natural curiosity that I need to learn next about the temperature. And I would ask that. I might Google some more. I'll find some other pieces of content represented by these dots. And as I go through this process, I'll start following different trains of thought, and some of them will lead to dead ends, but eventually, if I do this enough, one of them will lead me to my goal. And that is what we want to simulate or copy. That natural learning process is what we want to copy in the classroom. So we have students do the exact same thing represented by our inquiry cycle here, where students start with their goal, and then on the left here, they form a question of their own curiosity, their natural next question, what they think they need to learn. And they go around this cycle of finding information on their own from adults in the community, from friends in school, from the internet. They summarize that and then share and reflect with their discussion group in class what they got out of this. And they do that a number of times. And what we found is that's really fun, but it's easy to go down rabbit holes. So we add in this thing called a distillation. And every, say, 2 to 5 cycles of this, everyone pauses and we create an infographic explaining everything that we've learned so far. So for anyone who's worked in sort of a K-12 world, you might notice in this that we're kind of purposely building in a whole bunch of these higher order thinking skills that are standards now in most states. So we're talking about finding information, quoting and summarizing information, identifying, distilling a summary of information, synthesizing your own opinions. We're hitting all of those in this cycle as we go. So that is the research cycle. Let's jump to the next slide here. So now that we have a base understanding of the research cycle, I want to take, well, no, okay, so we'll dive into this. So we want to dive in and actually do this with you all based on our goal. So we are going to start by brainstorming natural next questions. Sorry, Carolyn, did I get the slides off there?
You're good. I'm gonna, because we're gonna be typing in that one. I'm gonna, yeah.
So we're gonna start by brainstorming our own natural next questions. So as a reminder, our winning goal question here was,
it's up on the screen there. Yep.
Yep. What can we do to make composting the norm for my or our community? And we want to do the same thing. Let's take, I'll give us 3 minutes again. I think we have time for 3 minutes there for everyone to take on their own, write their own question down before we all share out. So just make sure you write at least one down in these 3 minutes. That's your natural next question. The next thing you might want to know more about in order to start finding a solution or finding an action to take for this goal. And then after we've done that, I'll ask everyone to share out. So I'll give everyone 3 minutes now to do some thinking on your own.
How are we doing? Is anybody, does anybody have a question about the process, or are we doing well with making our natural next questions and putting them in chat? Oh, there's tons. Look. All right, I'm gonna hit enter too.
All right, I think we're at the sharing step. It sounds like everyone's already ready to send their ideas out.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, these are great. So I wasn't even thinking about composting before we ran this session, and suddenly I'm really curious about composting in our community where I am right now.
I know.
Well, the answer to these questions, they've totally got me thinking.
I know, I see them. I see it everywhere, but I don't really know that much about it. So this is very helpful.
Whoa, we have some
we have
frightening facts here that we're going to need to put into a synthesis for everyone.
Whoa.
initial research already done.
And
Yeah,
wow,
nice
Bruce,
job.
you are such an overachiever. Okay, that's awesome.
All right, let's start moving on from here. But if you have more questions, feel free to keep posting them. I'm just gonna keep us moving through the program here. I will say, ordinarily, if we were doing this in a classroom, we would. There's my timer for our question asking time. That was perfect. If we're doing this in the classroom, we'd often do this as sort of a round robin, where each person could share one out, and they might put a sticky note on the board and briefly explain what they asked and why. In this case, I think we're going to jump straight to a quick round of voting again. Should we go through that, Lindy and Carolyn?
Yeah, let's just, we do need to know what our best question is because we need to talk about it in the next section.
Cool.
And so maybe we should just each have one vote. Is that too radical? No, okay, too radical. Go ahead, Turner.
Oh, no, I agree. One vote is great. So we'll do the exact same thing here that we did last time, where everyone can put in the number for the question they most like here. And I'll say the question you think would be the most helpful to moving our research forward in the chat, and hit enter, and we'll total up all of them and see what the favorite is.
Wow, we got a good mix.
I think that's most of our votes. Yeah, are we missing anyone? I guess we're missing a couple.
That's awesome. That's really great.
All right.
Hey,
Assuming this is everyone, we have 3 votes for number 8. That is the winner by 1 vote. And Lindy, you're taking over from here, right?
I am taking over for here. Okay, so think about this. Wait, go back for a second. Let's just stay on that screen for just a second. Thanks. So what I want you to do is think for a moment about question 8. Like, even if you didn't choose question 8, and hopefully you think that it's a pretty decent question, think about question 8 and what makes that a compelling question. Why do you suppose that won the vote? And I want you to think about it, but if you feel like sharing your ideas, like either in chat or out loud, like what makes that a good question? What makes it the right kind of natural next question that makes it valuable? That's the question that I'm asking. And while you're thinking about that and maybe sharing, I just want to say that this next section, I'm super excited about, like I have been for years, as Turner and Carolyn know, it's like my favorite thing, because I was teaching this way in class about 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And I started drawing the mind map, like the one that Turner showed you, up on the board of everything that we'd learned so far, every question, and then the results that we had from that question. And we started talking about whether we knew the answers to the questions. And the students suddenly realized there were some questions that were not clear enough that they really couldn't answer them exactly or know if they were answered. And suddenly they realized that the way they stated the question made it a more or less valuable question, or a question that they could or couldn't answer. And suddenly we started thinking, we can actually figure out and score and make a rubric from what makes a question more valuable. And so here's some ideas. So the answer to our question 8, what keeps people from composting, could increase composting, making it the norm, right? If we know what's stopping people, then maybe we can make a change. So it seems directly valuable to our goal question. So by understanding what keeps people from composting, you can understand how to address it. And then being able to pinpoint the objections that people have in order to convince them to do the right thing. So I think that your answers there in the chat are telling me that this is just a high, right? It's not a yes, no question. That is super important. It cannot be yes, no. It really does not help us if it's yes, no. And it is directly valuable to our goal. So now that you've thought a little bit about what makes a question good, I'm going to take you through our rubric that we've developed for how to actually rate, to score, to literally grade the productivity of someone's research question. And so we use this not only to score questions and give grades actually in the classroom situation, but more importantly, that the students score their own questions and each other's questions. And that teaches them how to give and receive helpful peer feedback that they need in order to improve their own question and get better outcomes for themselves. And so it's a really key part of feedback that we don't train a lot in school. A lot of times feedback in school just means a grade, which is often kind of painful and you're reactive to it and it doesn't really help you improve. But here we're teaching people how to use a score to help each other improve in a way that is directly relevant to their own next steps. And so this is meant to be exactly what you should do in the workplace, is help each other improve for outcomes that matter. And so that's what we're trying to train here. And so, so what is a great natural next question? So our question productivity index has 3 parts to it. And so just look at this slide for a second, and there's our goal, the same one we've been talking about all along, you know, increasing composting. And then we're starting from that starting point there with that dot. And imagine your natural next question as an arrow, the way we've drawn it here, something that'll take you a step up toward a direction that's maybe toward your goal. And so the first of our rubric items for our question productivity index, we call specificity. Have you actually stated your question in a way that everyone understands it to mean the same thing? Turns out it's really hard to say a question specifically enough that everyone in your group understands it to mean the same thing. And so we're showing it here as, is it this question or is it really that question or this other question? So how specific is it? Is it really specific enough? Then our second part of our rubric is value. And that's really what you guys were getting on as you're talking in the chat. Is answering this natural next question directly critical for getting to our goal? And so it's almost like the angle between your natural next question and a line that takes you straight to your goal. I would say the question we voted on would have a very high value. It would point directly toward the goal. So that's what value is. And then the third part is scale. How big a question is it? Sometimes it's possible to ask questions that are really as large as your goal question is, like a question that would take you several weeks to really understand, something that's really too big for just a one-step natural next question. And sometimes you can ask a question that's too small. If it's a yes/no question, or if it's a question you could just Google it and you know the answer, that question is too small. So these are the 3 parts of our question productivity rubric: scale, specificity, and value. So if we go to the next slide, I want to show you that rubric, and hopefully this isn't too small. Oh, let's see, maybe we can paste in that natural next question, what keeps people from composting, into there. And so we're going to start by just kind of running through this. I think Carolyn's pasting it into this, and then we'll go back. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I want us to kind of think about this together as a group and see if we can kind of score it together and get a little practice with this question productivity index rubric. This is something that we use all the time in class. The students actually score their own questions, like I was saying, in each other's questions. So we'll start with value, which is the one over on the left. These are all 5-point scales. And so the top value, so value is how valuable would answering this question be for answering your big goal question. And a perfect 5 is answering this question would provide information that is both vital and necessary for answering our big goal question. And then a 3 might be answering the question would support the project or the learning goal, but there's some doubt about its value. And then a 1 would be answering the question might be interesting, but it's not necessary for answering the big goal question. And I have to tell you, I run a class like this online, completely online, asynchronous, with students doing open inquiry by themselves with just these touch points. And they work through these questions very, very carefully. And very, very often, they're extremely excited about their natural next question, but it turns out it has a value of 1 because it's really a question of curiosity. They're really dying to know the answer, but it doesn't actually help them get to their goal. And, you know, I always say to them, I'm so glad you can recognize that this is not a high value question, but if you're really curious about it, go for it. Like, that is a great learning opportunity. I have no problem with that. So my question for you all, and maybe you can put into chat, how would you score the value of our question? What keeps people from composting in order to reach our goal? What do you think it is? A 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or a 0? It is a question, so it wouldn't be a 0. And so go ahead and put your answer in, and let's see if we agree on what the value of this question is. I'm going to put mine in. Yeah. Rachel, oh, we are all agreeing that that is a 5. Let me tell you, we are a fine team because we do not usually end up with a value of 5 the very first time around. So we totally know how to do this. We are experts. So then talking about scale, the scale part of it is how much time or effort or new knowledge would it be necessary to answer this question completely? This one's kind of a Goldilocks one where you really want it to be right size, just in the middle gets you a 5. If it's too big, it would be a 4 or a 2 at the top, like it's primarily aspirational. We're really never going to get to the answer of this, in 1 or 2 little research cycles. Or if it's just so straightforward and incremental, it's just Google, that's a tiny little 1. And so what do you think about what keeps people from composting? Is it appropriately sized for one self-contained research question, like go home and find one item and go for it? Oh, this is interesting. People are thinking it's a little bit too small, except I was thinking it was a little bit too big, and so is Carolyn. Yeah. That's what so that's really interesting. So, it would be really fun to try. Sometimes you don't know till you try and you see what kind of information is out there. Like, was it really easy to find all the answers in just one step? Or am I not sure that the answers I'm getting actually pertain to my community? Maybe that was a survey that was done in a different state. So that's a really good one to think about scale. And then so the final one is specificity. You get a 5 on specificity if the question is clear, specific, and well posed and contains no subjective terms or bad grammar. So one thing we found is that people are very commonly write something like a question like, what is the best way to compost? But what does best mean? How would you define that? And until you all agree exactly on what best is, then that question is not specific enough because it could mean anything. And so you'd have to rewrite it. So that's a very common way for a question to lack specificity. And so how would you grade specificity? Is it clear, specific, and well posed? So it gets a 5. Is it understandable, but maybe a little effort? So that would be number 3. Or is it just too many subjective terms and it just cannot be confidently answered? I think I would probably give it a 4 myself. Yep, people are giving it 3s and 4s. Anybody want to share a reason why you think it's not specific enough? What part would you pick on? Yeah. So detailing homeowners versus companies. Yeah, I guess for me, I would say to my students, what do you mean by people? Keeps versus prevents. That's really good. That's a good one. So you see when you start digging into this that it's possible to really improve your questions so that you get your answers much more specifically. And this is actually a process we find students really enjoy, actually, because they are able to reward themselves with faster and more effective work at the end. So that is that's our little discussion of what makes a better question. And so if we just go to the next slide, I'll just talk about this last slide. So in our facilitator's guide for Make It Matter, we send people through these question cycles. Ask your natural next question, go find an answer to it, bring it back and share it with everyone. And so you do that some number of times until you feel like it's time to synthesize and represent your findings to the whole team. Then maybe you go back and do some more question cycles until you feel you've done enough research. So those are steps A and B. And then finally, go back and look at your community action question. Have you now learned things that make you want to change how you stated your question up front? And then finally do a progress check-in. And by the end of this element 2 with the research and the inquiry cycles, you should know enough to be able to pick an action to do. And that would be element 3. So I think that is it for element 2. And then we want to just go ahead and talk about next steps.
Yeah, I can wrap us up. And then if anyone does have questions, hopefully we'll have a couple minutes for that. But I know we have a hard stop at 4:30. So one little note I wanted to add to Lindy's kind of share was just around Turner had mentioned a really great phrase where it's like, just helping the students. I think the students do really understand how valuable it is to refine that question because it does save them so much time in the research process. And so we started coming up with this phrase like spend 5 minutes doing QPI to save 30 minutes of research later. So I don't know if that's helpful for you all, but that's something that is nice for us to reframe this activity for the students. So it is really meant to help them. It is not busy work. It is not a checkbox. This is going to make everything more efficient in the long term. So just like wrapping up a couple of things, I think Lindy kind of touched on the last couple elements. We don't have time to go over these today, but really what element 3 is in a very short nutshell, students then translate all that research that they've just done into a plan for action. And so they synthesize that research. Sometimes that research, is taking multiple sessions, multiple weeks. And then they start brainstorming, like, what are the possible actions that we might take based off what we know now and specific to the community that we've decided on. And so they go through a similar process of brainstorming and voting like we've done today, and eventually land on 1 or 2 actions that they want to take. And then from there, they create a work plan and a timeline and a budget to then take that action. And so this can take between like 3 to 5 sessions with students and can vary in length. But we've seen a lot of folks do it within, 3 weeks to 5 weeks, depending on how often you're meeting with your students. And then 4 is really focused around that action. So whatever the plan was that you created, you're taking that action. And then 5 is that lessons learned, where they're really another synthesis opportunity to just share all the learnings and ideas and breakthroughs and challenges that they've had through the process, reflect on it, and put it in a shareable document that can be given to the next team coming in. And so one of the memorable moments with Mesa was we're working with the 5th and 6th grade teachers. And so it really was truly a pass off where the 6th graders have reflected and they've come up with these little videos of reflecting on what they did over the semester. And then also an actual letter and their overall synthesis, their document. And so the 5th graders coming in are going to get that, and then they get to kick off. Either they can use that same goal or that same focus, or they come up with a new one, but they take those learnings away with them. So it's really fun to see that pass off and that meaning. So the last, so in terms of the remaining next steps that we have, we'd love for you to try out the structure. We will send you all this deck so that you can try it out. Please feel free to use the QPI rubric. We can also include a PDF version, so you could even hand it out to your students or use it yourself. We actually do have, like Turner mentioned, a wide variety of folks using this. This has been used in K through 12 in higher education, and some corporations are even using this to help think about how you can improve your question asking. So it's definitely a transferable tool. And then lastly, just please feel free to reach out to collaborate. We are continuing to collect data on this. I think our paper will be published soon, or if it is not already, through the conference. So we are continuing to work with the pilots that Turner mentioned this fall and then spring 2022. So we'll have even more data, and we'll be updating our kind of report out on how things are going and how the retention and the personal belonging and the engagement of students are doing this very open inquiry, high autonomy process for students. So that'll be coming out in the next 9 months or so. And I just have our emails here, but you'll get these slides so you can reach out to us as well. And that is it. So would love to have anyone share any questions, or other than that, we can hopefully have a great Friday afternoon and can enjoy your evening.
Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to post them there in chat. We seem like a friendly sharing group, so I don't think there'll be any problems with that.
And also, if anybody's done things like this, it would be really great to hear what you think might work better, or any suggestions that you have would be really interesting also, just to have the dialogue.
Well, it's interesting you use the term structure, because as you were going through the steps, it made me think of a liberating structure, if you're familiar with those.
Oh, yeah.
Can you share more about that? I'm curious, like when you say, I'm actually not familiar with the term liberating structure.
Yeah, liberating structures, it's a collection of structures or processes you can follow to get certain outputs from a group of people. And the idea is it makes everybody on equal terms, or every idea that's shared of equal terms. And some help bring groups together, some help them reach a decision, some help them, some structures help predict the future. A simple one is called 1, 2, 4, all. As an example, you pose a question, each person writes their answer down, then that's the one. Then for 2, they pair up with somebody, share their answer, pick the best one. And then 4, you get the 2 pairs together. They share all their 2 ideas, pick the best. And then everybody gets together and shares their idea and picks the best one.
Cool.
I love that.
So there's a question
That's
here.
a great question. Yeah, what aspect do teachers find most challenging? I don't know. Carolyn, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So I think challenges that when we're working with teachers, I think one thing is that it is a shift in mindset, right? To move from a model where you're expected to have all the answers to every question as a teacher to, hey, the students are in the lead. I'm not expected to have the answers. In fact, it's even easier if I don't know the answers, because then I could just say, I don't know, and let's figure it out together. So that is actually quite a big shift and often challenging, especially, when you're maybe kicking off a new curriculum that is kind of more traditional, and then also adding this. One of the ways that teachers have addressed that barrier is having a very specific time for Make It Matter, always on Wednesdays, right? That are like early release days. And so that is kind of one way that they can like take a break and really think, okay, it's our Make It Matter time. I'm shifting my mindset. This is a different way that I teach during this time. We also have targeted learning communities where we essentially it's a fancy way of just saying we meet with teachers every other week or once a month to essentially use a inquiry-based process to troubleshoot and solve problems together. So all the teachers bring their questions, they share out what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, and together as a group we solve for that. And if the Beagle team doesn't know, then we obviously follow up with support materials after we dig into it more. So we are constantly modeling it. And so in that way, we do see over the span of the semester, both the students transform and also the teachers teaching and mindset transforms as well. We're all transforming together. We're all flailing forward. So those are kind of just quick thoughts off the top of my head.
I wanted to throw one other thing out there, which is to say what we're showing today is this very high level process for how this applies to any project you're working on. And one thing we do a lot with instructors, whether we're working with them, actually coaching them, or whether they're just using our app and doing this on their own, is we design classes that are more or less scaffolded, right? So you can sort of selectively take away choice from this, which we're always kind of against, but it really helps to get people going. So you can set a goal question for the students in the first time round, and then you don't have to worry about that. You know where they're headed. And so that can be a really big comfort the first time someone does this. And we might do that and do a small project where the goal is set. And then the second time they do it, the goal isn't set and the students choose it. So that kind of scaffolding can also really help to build up the confidence.
I do this in classes at Arizona State University with freshmen all the way up through 5th year graduate students in the same class, because we're going for a goal that no one knows the answer to. Everyone is just level setted to be equals right from the beginning and share whatever information they have. And the thing I especially wanted to mention was this way that we've been doing the inquiry cycle, which is just a variant of many other kinds of inquiry cycles that other people have, but the concept of then putting it into a mind map has been pretty powerful. And several graduate students have taken it on to actually organize their entire PhD thesis. And so then the undergraduates see them using this question cycle really to learn new knowledge, and they feel empowered to actually learn new things too. And that's been a really nice dynamic.
Yeah, does your paper have examples of this being applied in a corporate setting? Because I can see this being part of social learning, which, corporations are very slow to adopt as a learning strategy.
Oh my gosh. We don't have anything in our paper, but we've just been doing a big training session with SABIC, as part of Saudi Aramco. But Carolyn and Turner both have examples. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't include that in the paper in particular. We've done, Carolyn can talk about her example too, and then we've done SABIC. And I think that it's actually ends up being pretty different, I think, in not in the what they do, but in the way that we've presented and talk about it in a corporate environment, because the goals of the participants are often very different than they would be in school.
Right.
Yeah, but it would be great to share more on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess a little note since, and everyone feel free to add any other questions, but so before I joined Beagle, I was a director of customer success at a digital marketing agency called Straight North. And so I actually used this model, an inquiry-based model, with my team of 6. And I specifically made, I don't know if I would call this social learning time, but maybe that is what it was under that umbrella. But we met every Monday for an hour specifically to address a problem that, our leadership had stated, but then we used an inquiry-based model to have the team come up with those natural next questions that they felt like were most important to research and prototype. And within 6 weeks, they kind of did that bulk of research and then created a prototype to solve the problem, which we actually implemented and started getting data on. So that was really cool because it was that completely team-led model, and they were totally learning and doing at the same time. And it was aligned to like leadership goals, which is kind of that critical component. It seems like with corporate, it has to be driving to that leadership goal. So I don't know if that's where your head was at, Bruce, but that's just one example.
No, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and feel free to chat us your email if you're interested in getting the slides. We could also, we'll follow up separately and send over those slides as well.
Yep. Thanks so much for coming. It was really fun. And thanks for organizing the conference, you organizers.
Yes. Thank you all so much.